We got a new brawler, and it's not a direct copy of an old one, so I'm really excited. I'm going to talk about everything we know about the new Brawler Lola from the Brawl Talk, as well as go into a bit of her finer details that I don't think anyone has really talked about yet. So Lola is going to have the same health as Nita and Poco, which is 5,600, so she's actually fairly tanky. Not to mention that when she uses her clone from the super, that also sort of acts as a shield in some situations, even though it's not that great to use your clone as a shield. But your clone is going to have half of your health at 2,800. Now, what makes Lola seem really good is the fact that her main attack just deals so much damage. With just one attack, she shoots 6 projectiles, each doing 392 damage, so that's going to be a total of 2,352. But the thing is, when she only has one ammo left, she gets a 30% damage buff, which makes each of the projectiles do 509 damage. Now, this could be part of her star power, or this could be part of her base kit. It seems more like a very specific star power mechanic than anything else, but either way, you're probably going to have this when running Lola, so it is something to take into account when considering how good she's gonna be. But if she does 509 per projectile on her last shot, that's a total of 3,054 damage, which is a lot, considering it's perfectly possible to hit all your shots on a single target, and if you don't hit all your shots, at least hit most of them. So just for comparison, 8-Bit, who has a pretty similar spread attack to Lola, just with a lot more range, because 8-Bit has 10 tiles of range, whereas Lola only has about 6.5 to 7 tiles of range from what I could tell from the footage. 8-Bit does 448 damage per projectile, but he also shoots 6 projectiles. And the thing is, assuming half of your shots are the boosted attack from using your last shot and half of the shots are just the normal 392 damage when you're running Lola, then the average damage per projectile is actually 450, which is very close to the 448 of what 8-Bit does per projectile. And I think since a lot of times you're not just going to be waiting at full health, I'd say about half of your shots probably will be the last ammo you have saved up. Maybe a bit under 50%, so maybe 8-Bit does ever so slightly more damage, but it is still pretty close. Now, Lola doesn't have nearly as much health as 8-Bit, but she does walk at a normal speed, which is a huge plus. And her reload speed is going to be a bit slower at about 1.8 seconds from what I could tell, compared to 8-Bit's 1.5 seconds. So now let's take a look at the interesting part, which is her attack pattern, because it looks kind of random, but of course, like all the other brawlers in the game, there's a specific pattern to where the projectiles she shoots actually end up. So there are essentially 3 different directions she shoots her shot in. Some go a bit to the right, some go a bit to the left, and then some just go straight forward. And basically, the order of her attack is it goes center, right, left, left, center. So since the difference between the 2 left shots and the difference between the 2 right shots is exactly the same, you don't get too much of an advantage from maybe slightly aiming your attack towards one side or the other. Maybe you can aim it ever so slightly to the left because the 2 right shots are going to hit your opponent a bit earlier than the 2 left shots, but it's by so little that there's really not much of an effect if you're going to aim your shot slightly to the left. But theoretically, I guess it could make it harder for your opponents to dodge. But you have to keep in mind that if you're strafing left or right while using your attack, then if you shoot one of the center projectiles followed by a right projectile, they might actually be pretty close together or really far apart depending on which direction you're strafing in. And so that's going to make her pretty consistently hit about 4 of her projectiles, I think. Because either the first and the second projectile are going to be basically overlapping, or the first and the third projectiles are going to be basically overlapping depending on which way you're strafing. And then in the same way, the 5th and 6th projectiles are going to be pretty much going in the same direction, or the 4th and the 6th projectiles. So those 4 projectiles are probably going to hit an opponent if you're lined up with them, whereas the other projectiles might be going off in a different direction, but that's if you're strafing when using your shots. That might actually help you get a bit more average damage overall, but I'll have to test her a bit more when she comes out to see if that's actually true. And now we get into the fun part, which is what happens to her damage when you actually use your super and you have a clone there supporting you. There are so many ways you can actually use this clone to get benefit in the middle of a game, and I'm definitely going to make a full comprehensive video about that when I actually know more about her clone and have time to think about all the possible ways in which you can use it. Make sure you're subscribed and you have notifications on so you know when I post that video. But one of the most basic ways of using it is basically just throwing it directly on top of yourself, maybe a little bit behind you, so that any attack that hits you doesn't hit your clone, because you can heal automatically, but your clone can't. So as long as you stay alive, you're basically just having the clone damage straight up added to your own damage, and that's really good because you already do so much damage, and the clone actually does the exact same amount of damage as you, so you're literally just doubling your damage if you just put a clone directly on top of yourself. So your main attack would then shoot 12 projectiles, each doing 392 damage, which is a total of 4,704, and on top of that, you can also have the damage buff from it being your last shot. Now that only applies to your attack, not to your clone's attack, so your clone still stays at 392 per projectile. But in that case, you could be doing up to 5,406 damage per attack, and on a heist or something that's stationary, you're guaranteed to get all of that damage with just a single attack. So that's an insane amount of DPS. As a very famous commercial once said,
That's a lot of damage.
And I think this way of using the clone with Lola is probably going to be one of the most popular because it's a very easy way to keep your clone alive since you don't really have to dodge any extra shots from wherever your clone is. Since your clone's gonna be in the same location as you, it's just gonna dodge with you. And also, you don't have to focus on attacking in a different direction because you just attack where you normally would attack, and your clone's also going to be attacking in that same area. But like I said, I definitely want to look a lot more into the clone in the future. And that's what we've been able to figure out from this Brawl Talk. We'll be getting a lot more information in the coming weeks, so make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so that you can be the first to know about all the new tricks with the new brawler and everything coming up in this new update. Get hype, I'm really looking forward to it.